La 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 la. Hi guys, hello, welcome. It's good to see everyone. Nice to see you again, Miss Creative Delusion. Also, I saw that right out the gate. One chip challenge? Yeah, not happening. Not happening. The hot sauce challenge, yes. The one chip challenge, no. I'm not doing that. I only say that because, oh god, so let me turn this down a little bit because I am a little bit loud. Okay. So, one chip challenge. Yeah, we sold that for a time at my job, but unfortunately, we sold that for a time at my job as well as a bunch of other stores were selling the one chip challenge, and that is a thing, and I did consider doing it for a time, but then, it got pulled off the shelves because someone actually died. Like, someone legit did the challenge, the one chip challenge, and just died. And I ain't risking that. I will do the 10 sauces challenge. Well, or 6. I think that Rick and Morty pack had 6. Hold on. Yeah, 6. I will do 6 hot sauces rather than one chip that will kill me. Anyways, so with that being said, yeah. Yeah, that happened. I think I heard it from a coworker, but let me see if that's like... I actually have not fact-checked that, so let me check that out. I mean, it would make sense because I have not seen the one chip challenge since. Oh, yep. Yep. Yep, that's real. Anyways. Stay away from the chip. Oh, hell no. I ain't going near that chip. Just, nah, the chip ain't happening. The sauces, yes. I will happily eat the sauces, which, funnily enough, okay, so what really inspired me to take the challenge was, the hot sauce challenge was Shoto, one of my favorite VTubers. I love him to death, and I remember seeing his, like, sauce stream, the hot sauce, challenge stream, and I immediately was like, ooh, I want to do that. I want to do that. Not just because, like, you know, 6 was ghost pepper, I can't wait. Oh yeah, it's exciting. I'm personally nervous. I gotta get another camera, that way you guys can get a hand cam. But yeah, that's gonna be an interesting one. Okay, so with that being said, since it is a Sunday, before we get started on a reading stream, we are going to do our weekly reading. So let me go get my cards out, get them ready to go. Let me see. I think one of them is ghost pepper. I did see that one was Los Calientes. No, not Los Calientes. The hottest one is the Diablo. I saw that the hottest one was Diablo. And I think that is the one with the ghost pepper, like you mentioned. But I could be wrong. Let me see. Do our little shuffle. How is this week gonna go? What can we expect? But yeah, I'm really excited to do that. Like, the minute I get another camera, which will be soon, I may do this challenge maybe, like, right out the gate next month, since it shouldn't be too hard for me to get the other camera. Oh, there it is. Let's see. Okay, that's one card. Thank you. Okay. Let me see. This card's really calling out to me. So, okay, that's going to be our conflict card. And then we have our resolution card. So, as per usual, before we get started with streaming for the week, we do our weekly reading of basically a 3 tarot spread where one card represents us, the next card represents our trials, and then the final card is our resolution. What can we do this week? What steps can you take this week to combat the trials and tribulations of this week? And we have our cards. Okay. Let me get that all set up. Okay. So, card number 1, indicator card. 6 of Swords, or it's reversed. Okay. And then we have our conflict card. Ooh, the Devil reversed. Okay. I think the Devil popped up in our reading last week. So, interesting. And then 2 of Wands reversed for our resolution card. All reversed. Funny. Oh well. Okay, let me see. 6 of Swords. 6 of Swords reversed. Oh, nope, that's Cups. You're so cursed. Nah, you'll be fine. The Devil just means that there's a bitch in your life you gotta cut out. Anyways. I'm kidding. Okay. Let's see. 6 of Swords reversed. So, the 6 of Swords can mean that you are refusing to move on, or that your ability to move on has been stalled, delayed, or interrupted. If it's the former, remember to try not to let your emotions get the best of you. Letting go of the negativity of the past is a logical, healthy thing to do, so don't let your heart stop you from healing. Alright. That's our indicator card. Pop off. Okay, and then we have the Devil reversed. Let's see. Devil. There you are. Devil reversed. And the Devil reversed. This card is call to action or a harbinger of change. You're ready to break the cycle of addiction, unhealthy habits, and problematic dependencies and move forward to become a more fulfilled and happier you. Release yourself from those chains. And then we have 2 of Wands reversed for our resolution card. Which honestly, this looks like a pretty straightforward, easy peasy reading. Okay, 2 of Wands reversed. 1 reversed, this card warns of either giving up too soon or acting too quickly on your new venture. You may be excited to start, but that doesn't mean you should forgo planning or following through. Lay the groundwork and see this thing into the finish line. Okay, so pretty straightforward reading. So for this week, you may feel a little stagnant. You may feel like there's an interruption in your way of thinking. You're or even then, you're probably stuck to a routine that feels very dull. It's a routine that feels dull and you need to spice it up. This week is the time to do it. This is the week where you definitely should explore your horizons, look and see what you can find, work on yourself. However, I will warn you, our resolution card did warn us that we can get a little ahead of ourselves. So just take it easy this week, pace yourself, work towards your own healing, work towards your own thing, but make sure to make time for yourself, relax, and don't push yourself too much. Okay? All right. So with that being said, we will jump right into our reading. Thank you guys so much. That is our weekly tarot reading, and then we will get on to our reading. So this is going to be a little bit of a shorter stream just because I'm feeling a little sleepy and I do have some work to do before I go to bed. But if anything, I'm going to chug through as many chapters as I can. Luckily, it's not too bad. There's still a good few chapters left. If anything, I'll try and knock out as many chapters as I can, and if anything, we'll save it for our next stream. So I'll pop us over to our reading room, and then we'll get started. Okay, let me see. And make sure the rain ambiance is on. Okay. How's that rain ambiance, by the way? Is that good? Is it too loud? Too quiet? Let me know. Okay. So, that being said, let's get started. Interlude 2. Looks like this year was an off year. Thank goodness. When they started school, there were exactly 30 desks and all of them were full. We didn't have anyone extra. What a huge relief. It was an off year last year too, remember? Have there ever been 2 years in a row where nothing happened? Isn't it enough that it happened to us? Totally. Maybe it's getting weaker. Still, I wonder if it's true that once that starts, someone with ties to our class dies every month. I just find it hard to believe still. But come on, they even had that torch passing, so it's not exactly a baseless story, is it? Plus, there were a couple third-year students who died 2 years ago, remember? Accident or suicide or whatever. And a couple people and their families. And that's true, but it's so scary. Your family can get dragged in too. Just by you going to class. It's your parents and siblings that are really in trouble. They told us there's that rule. That everyone related to you by blood within 2 degrees is fair game. Within 2 degrees? So, like, my grandma and grandpa too? That's what I heard. They said they're safe if they're more distant, like aunts, uncles, and cousins. What about that part where if you don't live in this town, you're safe? Oh, I heard that too. Me too. So then, if it came to that, you could leave town. But come on. You can't exactly do that when you're in middle school. Even if I told my parents, I bet you they wouldn't believe me. But hey, it didn't happen this year, so why worry about it? I'm so relieved, seriously. If we had someone extra, we wouldn't have had to treat someone like they're not there, right? That sounds so stressful. When that happens, the teachers help you, though. Sounds complicated. Who'd you think would have been not there? The tactical officers pick a candidate, don't they? They probably picked someone over spring break in case it was an on year. Probably. I wonder if it was Misaki. You think so too? I mean, her last name is Misaki and everything. I heard her family lives in the town of Misaki. I know. It's this creepy doll museum place. She's so weird, isn't she? I don't think she has that many friends either. Whenever I try talking to her, she's all cold or, like, distant. She always has an eye patch on, right? Her left eye is fake. That's why it's blue. Wow. Really? I don't know how to deal with people like that. Me either. Me either, really. Insert asterisk here because apparently this is a time skip. I mean, if you want, take your chance. I mean, go ahead. Like, personally, I don't think I can make it. Like, I mean, I think I can make it, but unfortunately, it's not really something everyone in this series can control because once the not there person is noticed, then it's all downhill. Same here. I will definitely take that gamble because, like, yikes. Let's see. That's a spoiler. I'm going to be quiet. Okay, so, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Time skip. Did you hear about the transfer student? Yeah, they said he's coming in next week. It's already the second half of April. What a weird time to transfer. Definitely. I think that's going to be a problem. A problem? Don't you think this could be dangerous? Huh? Come on. About the thing. What? No way. The transfer student coming here means that starting next week, the number of people in the class will go up, and we're going to be short 1 desk. Which means, you mean this year isn't actually an on year? People are saying that it could be. Hold on a sec. When the transfer student gets here, the number is going up, right? So that means we didn't have anyone extra at the very beginning of April. That's true. But it could be a different pattern than it's ever been before, or two, don't you think? Why would they go and put the kid in class 3 anyway? The school must have had a reason to do it. Seriously, though. After all, it isn't a publicly recognized issue. I heard the principal hardly even knows about it. Besides that, I heard the kid's name is Sakakibara. Whoa, that's not a very promising name. But that's not enough reason to say... But the guy's actually... Another time skip. I heard that Kazumi and Sakuragi went to the hospital yesterday to visit Sakakibara. Yep, to visit him and do some recon. What happened? Apparently he came here for some family reason, but he said this is the first time he's ever lived in Yuyama. So then, he hasn't even stayed here for very long. Before. Well, then. So at least it probably isn't him, they said. You mean he's not the causality? Casualty. Oh. I'm silly. It might be a translation issue because sometimes when I'm reading this light novel, it seems to shift from causality to casualty. So, I'll try to accommodate for it. That's right. Kazumi shook his hand, just to make sure. He shook his hand? I forget, does that mean something? Apparently there's some story that if you shake the hand of the casualty, when you first meet them, you'll know. Their hand's supposed to be freakishly cold. Are you sure that's true? He said Sakakibara's hand wasn't cold. So then, what does that mean? It's someone besides him. Oh, figures. Maybe someone besides him is the extra. We have to consider that possibility, he said. The tactical officers are working on it? Looks like we're going to talk it over, everyone together. That's probably when we'll... I have no idea how much of this to believe, for real. It's like that for everyone. I know I feel like that, but if it really does start, things will get bad. Yeah. Someone's going to die every single month, and that's not going to be a problem we can shrug off on someone else. You're right. Yeah. So we're gonna... Another time skip. The transfer student, Koichi Sakakibara, will be coming to school next week starting June 6th. Considering that he's transferring in, couldn't that mean it's starting a month late, that's on the verge of starting this year? It's unprecedented, but for now, that interpretation is reasonable. No, it's safer. That's what I think. But given that this is an anomalous situation, this year might actually be an off year, although it would be difficult to undo the damage if an off chance that it's not, so... As we mentioned earlier, it seems there was a major inadequacy in the countermeasures of 2 years ago. Accordingly, a total of 7 students in Class 3 and their family members passed away. Are we agreed then, everyone? As decided earlier, when May begins, we must behave as if Misaki is not present in our class. Diligence is required at all times between arriving at school and leaving campus, at the least. Understood? Sir? Yes, Sakuragi. Are the other teachers aware of this? Besides yourself and Miss Mikami. I expect their fullest possible cooperation. However, there is to be absolutely no discussion of this matter with teachers other than ourselves. Not only teachers, you mustn't speak about this to anyone outside of class. Indeed, I would ask everyone to refrain from mentioning this to others as much as possible. We're told that the result of breaking this rule is to invite undue calamity. In a manner of speaking, this is a confidential decision, a secret that must be concealed exclusively within 3rd year Class 3. It cannot be revealed without good reason. Sir? Yes, Yonemura. Does that include families too? We can't even tell our parents and siblings? The rule is that you must not speak of it. But do I make myself clear? The school, as a public educational institute, will never openly acknowledge that, predicted it on the existence of something as unrealistic as a curse. The sort of illogical countermeasure was employed to prevent it. Despite the fact that many deaths have in fact occurred in the past, that is why this system has been passed on for many long years in the form of a covert tradition among the group. The secret must be protected from all those outside the group, all right? Misaki, In some sense, from your perspective, this discussion has taken an extremely unreasonable turn. You're likely to have a very difficult time, but is that alright? Will you cooperate? If I were to say no right now, what would stop you? Would that stop you? Oh wait, will you cooperate? Well, if I were to say no right now, would that stop you? Well, of course, we cannot force you. You have the right to refuse. However, if we have no countermeasure in place, then the disasters begin for this year. Yes, I know. I understand. You will cooperate? Yes. In that case, everyone, beginning in May, I want everyone to do their best to fulfill this as the decision of the class, so we can overcome our shared difficulties and all graduate together in good health next March. And another time skip. Don't you think that's dangerous, the way Sakakibara is acting? Yeah, I do. I thought the teachers would have explained it to him before he got here. You would think so, but they're the teachers. Maybe they thought the students would handle it all amongst themselves. Yeah, there's a lot of time skips. I'm guessing this is providing context for the classroom's perspective. So we're seeing this from the class perspective right now. And Akazawa hasn't been at school. Is she sick? If she were here, she would have taken care of it, no problem. Maybe so. You gotta try harder. You're a tactical officer too, aren't you? But I never thought he would do that so soon. Whatever the plan was, he's already talked to her a bunch, and she's not supposed to be there. That blows it, no? We shouldn't have danced around it, and just brought it up sooner. You're telling me you and Sakuragi should have explained things to him when you saw him at the hospital or something? No, that day wasn't... The atmosphere wasn't right to just launch into a conversation like that. Then why not do it now? Hold on, what is it? Look, if we want to explain the situation to him now, the only way to do it is if we acknowledge that she's there. And wouldn't that be bad? I think it would be pretty bad, personally. Wouldn't it be okay if we told him outside school? Maybe. But what if that blows it too? They're making good points, but also some really good points. Oh my god. If you start to question everything, we're not going to be able to do anything. Still, we need to bring Sakakibara into line. Do something so he quits interacting with her. Otherwise, I'll try, I guess. How? I'll think about it. We can't really rely on that. Oh, excuse me. But don't forget, he went against the decision. So if no one dies in May, then that would solve the problem. We're asking all 3 questions, but if this year wound up being an off year after all, we'd be out of the woods. Yeah. I feel like maybe it'll be alright. That would be nice. But I guess until then, we've gotta get him to behave. Let's just hope this month ends without anything happening. For real. I'm assuming this is taking place right before, shoot, what was her name again? Oh, I feel bad that I literally forgot the name of a character, a significant character who died, so, oops. Let's see. Forgot her name, but wow, that was poor timing considering what's her name died. Okay. Okay, now we're back in the present day, so no worries about any more time skips. No more confusing time skips. Let me get a drink of water real quick. Nice. Anyways. Chapter 9. June 4th. That day, I got back to my grandparents' house in Koike after 9 o'clock at night. Dinner time was long past. I called on my cell phone to tell them I'd be back late, but I hadn't gotten through, so my grandmother's worry has swelled almost to a panic, and I got the feeling that I had gotten home even 10 minutes later she would have called the police. She lectured me soundly, but the laudable act of a grandchild saying, "I'm sorry, Grandma," calmed her more than I would have expected. Why were you lollygagging around at this hour? I thoroughly anticipated the question, and I answered in the most innocent tone I could. I was at a kid's house. I think we're friends now. That's all I said. Even if she asked more, I wasn't planning on telling her. Reiko had gotten home before me, and I guess it was natural, but she acted pretty concerned about me too. It looked as if they were about to hit me with some more questions, but in the end, I didn't discuss it in detail that night. I just couldn't summon the energy for it. I finished my meal in silence and hurried up to the second floor, where I laid down on the futon spread out in my study bedroom. Physically, I was exhausted, but in contrast, my mind was totally sharp. I rested an arm across my forehead and forced my eyes closed. Then almost automatically, the conversation I had had with Mei Misaki only hours earlier began to replay in my mind. One person in the class is treated as if they're not there. Doing that balances the books, and the disasters for that year brought by the extra person, that is, the casualty who snuck into the class, are prevented. At the least, they can be weakened. That was the talisman that had been suggested, executed, and proven effective for the last 10 years. At first, they had thought this year was as an off year, where nothing would happen. But when they realized that the transfer student, me, was coming after the start of a new semester and thus would have one extra person, the anxiety that this year might have taken a regular course spread through the class, and as a result, Mei Misaki was forced to assume the role of the one who's not there, starting in May, 1 month later than usual. Then the storyline had entered my mind step by step, but I just couldn't accept it as anything real. Even after May had finished explaining the broad overview, I still couldn't completely shake my bewilderment. When I went there, I hadn't intended to doubt what she had told me, not in the slightest. But, even so, I felt some resistance to completely letting go and believing everything she said. That's why you shouldn't have been let in. Wow, English. Hello. I'm silly. That's why you should have been let in on the very first day you came to school, Sakakibara. You should have gone along with everyone else and treated me as if I was not there, because otherwise the talisman weakens. But then at lunch that day, you just came up and started talking to me. When May mentioned it, I recalled again that scene that day. Hey, Sakakibara! What are you doing, Sakakibara? The dismayed sound of Teshigawara and Kazumi's voices, as they watched me hurry over to where May sat on the bench in the shade of trees. The two had a thought. Uh-oh. No question. They thought, uh-oh, and panicked, because they had to stop me from what I was doing. But then, I had been so sudden that there was nothing they could have done. Why? May had asked me that then. Are you sure about this? And that, it was only now that I felt I understood what she meant, and what the things she said next meant. You should be careful. You should be careful. It might have started already. If it was such an important decision, why didn't anyone tell me about it sooner? I said it half to myself, but May replied, they probably couldn't find the right moment. Maybe they thought it was hard to bring up for some reason. I already mentioned this, but I don't think anyone had thought of it that deeply. It's because I ran into you in the hospital before any of it had even happened, so I was surprised when I saw you in the classroom. That's why I went up to you that day. Nobody knew I'd seen you before, so they probably couldn't have anticipated that I would reach out to you that fast. Yeah? And after that, I ended up being the only one in class who kept interacting with you, never knowing what was going on, and that stirred up everyone's anxiety a little bit more every time. That's what it was. This also explained Yukari Sakuragi's odd reaction during gym that day. In fact, hadn't she been obsessing over whether or not I had heard something from Teshigawara and Kazumi? It was Sakuragi. Okay, that was her name. Oops, my bad. Teshigawara had, in fact, probably tried to tell me something during lunch. Yes, After the three of us had just gone towards Building 0, talking about nothing in particular, I spotted May right as he was bringing it up and telling me, there's actually something we... And then, after art class started the next day, I've been meaning to talk to you about this since yesterday, Teshigawara had said to me, but Mochizuki, who had been with us, had stopped him. I don't think you can do that anymore. Now I felt as though I understood even the nuance behind him saying anymore. I had already had contact with May, so talking to me in a way that might inadvertently acknowledge that a student named Mai Misaki exists wouldn't be alright anymore. That was the sort of apprehension Mochizuki must have felt then. Then the reaction when I had gone to the secondary library where May was, right after that. Hey, Sakaki, you're not really Sakakibara, what are you... And it wasn't just them. At the root of the conflict, dismay the class as a whole had shown in all kinds of cases ever since I had transferred here, there must have been a constant anxiety and, after all, fear and dread. Not towards Mai Misaki, towards the disasters for this year, which might befall because I was interacting with her. I got a call from Teshigawara on my cell phone out of nowhere, trying to warn me. He told me, quit paying attention to things that aren't there. It's dangerous. It had been a week since before midterm exams, when I had run up to the roof of Building C looking for May. I guess from his point of view, he was making a decisive move to stop me from messing with the talisman anymore. Probably. May gave a small nod. He told me something else that day, too. He said he'd tell me about what happened 26 years ago once June started. But then, even after June started, he never told me a word. He said things had changed. That was because Sakuragi had died. But why? You interacted with me and violated the decision they had gone to do so much trouble to uphold. I don't think they could help being nervous about that the talisman wasn't going to work anymore. But what if nothing had happened in May despite what you'd done? You mean, if no one had died? Right. If that had happened, that would mean this year was an off year after all. So there wouldn't be any need to keep the talisman going. And that's why... I see. If that had happened, there wouldn't have been any need to keep things so unnaturally concealed from me anymore. They'd be able to relax and explain the situation. And they'd be able to dump the weird strategy of treating one of their classmates as if they were non-existent. Speaking of which... So when Sakuragi and her mother died like that forecast bombed. It made it obvious that this year was an on year, and that the disasters have already started, so Teshigawara had told me things are different now than they were when I said that. Putting everything together like this, the alienness and doubts that had dug at my heart were clearing bit by bit, but... Can I ask you something? It was a vague issue that had been nagging at me ever since I first talked to May at school. It's your name tag. Huh? It looks so dirty and tattered. Why is it like that? Oh. Did I look like a ghost wearing it, or wearing an old name tag? Her cheeks softened slightly at the joke. I had an unfortunate accident, May replied. I dropped my name tag in the laundry and didn't notice, so it got washed. It's a pain to get a new one, so... Oh. That's all it had been? That's actually really silly. Sorry, repositioning. Okay. Collecting myself, I went on to ask one more question. What about how your desk is the only one in the class that's old? Is there a reason for that? Oh, that, May answered with a serious look this time. That's part of the custom. The student who's not there gets assigned in a desk like that. There are still old desks and chairs in the classrooms that we don't use anymore on the second floor of Building 0. They brought it from over there. Maybe it has some kind of meaning, a part of making the talisman work. I see. You know, I looked at the scratches on the desk. You what? The one that says, who is the casualty? You wrote that, didn't you? I did. May lowered her eyes and nodded. I know that I'm not the casualty, So then who in our class could it be this year? That's what it means. Oh, but... It was then that a kind of mean question slithered into my mind. I voiced it thoughtlessly. So you can be sure you're not the casualty, huh? May didn't answer. Before, didn't you say that the memory modification affected even the casualties themselves? So then how would anyone be sure it's not them? At a loss for words, May shut her mouth and blinked her right eye to hide her discomfort. I do believe that this is the first time I had ever seen her react like that. I'm telling you. When at last she began to speak, May shut her mouth once again. It was then that the door to the room opened. May's mother entered, the doll maker of Studio M, Kurika. She must have been working on the second-floor studio until that very moment. Kurika's wardrobe had a rough look. She wore black jeans with a black shirt just like May's, and a marigold-colored bandana over her hair. She was tall for a woman, and since she wasn't wearing any makeup, the fundamental attractiveness of her features was easy to see. She had a certain resemblance to May, certainly, but she seemed to be cloaked in an air far cooler than May's. I can't say why. When we had spoken on the phone, the whisper of uneasiness I had detected in her response had projected a different image. At first, she looked at me as though she had beheld some mythical beast. May is not the student president. She is the, no. May is just a regular student. At this point, it is Akazawa and I believe it was Kazumi. Yes, Kazumi, who is the class president, as well as now Akazawa, who we have not met just yet. We only got a few hints of her in the first bit. So we'll probably meet her at some point here. At first she looked at me as though she had beheld some mythical beast. This is my friend Sakakibara. He's the one who called. When May introduced me, her mother allowed and her expression changed. She had been mechanically doll-like and expressionless up to that point. But then, in the space of a second, an unnaturally broad smile came over her face. Welcome to our home. I'm so sorry you have to see me like this. As she spoke, she pulled a bandana off her head. This is a rare sight. My daughter bringing a friend over. It's Sakakibara, right? Yes. She never tells me how school's going. Are you a friend from class? Or maybe the art club? Art club? Was May in the art club? So then, she and Mochizuki have been. Sakakibara is also a visitor from the gallery downstairs. He happened across it and came in, and I guess he really liked it. We've been talking about dolls all day. May spoke to her own mother with a perfunctory professionalism. It sounded completely routine, too, not something unusual. You don't say. Kurika's smile became even more buddy-buddy. That's unusual for a boy. Have you always liked dolls? Yeah, I guess, I replied, feeling beyond tense. Oh, but, this is the first time I'd ever seen dolls like you have here up close. So I was really surprised. Surprised? Oh, I mean, I don't really know how to explain. In the overly air-conditioned room, it was a complete reversal from earlier. Sweat was threatening to break out all over my body. The dolls here, did you make them in the studio on the second floor, Kurika? I mean, ma'am? That's right, I did. Which of the little darlings did you like best? When she asked me that, the first thing that came to mind was the doll of a little girl in the coffin, resting in the back of the basement display room, but... I was far too self-conscious to bring it just up and tell her that, and I let my voice fade away. It probably would have seemed pretty comical to a bystander. You should probably get home, Sakakibara. May cut in then, thankfully. Oh, yeah. I'll walk in part of the way, she informed her mother, then got up from the sofa. Sakakibara just moved here from Tokyo in April. He doesn't know his way around yet. Did you really? The smile that had been there a moment before vanished from Kurika's face. The same doll-like expressionlessness she had worn when she'd come into the room had returned. Still, her voice retained its friendly likeness. You come over whenever you like. I walked side by side with May down on the darkened streets, where night had fallen completely. May was on the left and I was on the right. That way, the eye that wasn't a doll's eye could see me easily. A warm, wet wind was blowing, bringing the promise of the rainy season. It was so sodden with humidity. It was sodden with humidity and should have left clinging. It should have felt clinging. But right now, I found it strangely pleasant. Is it always like that? I asked, breaking the silence that had drawn on to awkward tension. What do you mean? May returned the question curtly. How you are with your mom. You talk so politely with her. Like how you would talk to a stranger. Is that weird? I don't know if I'd call it weird, but I guess I was just wondering if that's how mothers and daughters talk to each other. I think it's usually different. Her reaction was incredibly dry. That woman and I have always been like that. What's it like in your family? How does a mother talk to her son? My family doesn't have a mother. All I knew of how mothers are supposed to behave with their children, therefore, was information I gathered from the outside. What? I didn't know that. She died right after I was born, so it's always been just me and my dad. My dad had to go abroad for a year this spring, so all of a sudden I had to come here. I'm freeloading with my mom's family in Koike, so all of a sudden my family's twice as big. I see. May walked several paces with her mouth shut, then said, My mother and I can't help it. I'm one of her dolls, see? Exactly the same as the little darlings in the gallery. She didn't sound obviously sad or despondent or anything like that. Her tone was detached, like always. Still, I was a little taken aback, and the word no escaped my lips. That can't be. You're her daughter and you're alive. She was nothing like a doll. Before I could tell her that, May replied, I'm alive, but I'm not the real thing. Naturally, I couldn't help but be flummoxed by that. Not the real thing? Meaning, what? I wanted to ask, but the words stuck in my throat and I swallowed them, hard, because it seemed wrong to trespass that far. So I nudged the conversation back to our problem a little. Does your mom know about the stuff we talked about earlier today? About what's been going on in class since May? Not really, May replied promptly. We're not allowed to tell our families. Excuse me. We're not allowed to tell our families anyway, even if we could. I don't think I could talk about it. Would your mom be mad at you if she found out about the crazy thing the class is doing to you? I'm not sure. It might bother her a little, but she's not the kind of person who'd get mad and complain to the school either. How about you're out of school so much? You didn't come today either. You were at home, weren't you? She doesn't say anything. You knew about that? You can chalk it up to her being the hands-off type. Maybe it's more indifference than just hands-off. She shut away in her studio basically all afternoon anyway. It's like she forgets about everything else when she's got a doll or a painting in front of her. So she's not worried then. I stole a glance at May's face in profile beside me. Not even right now? No. Why now? What I'm saying is, you're walking home, the first boy who's ever come over to your house, and it's dark already, so, like that. I don't know. That stuff doesn't really bother her either. She's told me before, that's because I trust you. But I don't know if that's true. It could just be that's what she wants to believe. She stole a glance back at me, then, but she quickly turned her eye ahead again and went on. Just aside from one thing. One thing? I wonder what. I looked at May's face in profile again. She nodded, yep, then blinked slowly, as if to say she didn't want to talk about it, and suddenly stepped up her stride. I called out pretty loudly, Hey, Misaki, trying to stop her. Now that I've heard your explanation, I feel like I have a pretty good idea about the secret of third year class 3. But are you okay with that? What are you talking about? Again, her question came back harshly. I mean, how you have to act, for his talisman. Nothing I can do about it. This time, May's pace slowed suddenly. Someone has to be the one who's not there, after all. It just happened to be me. Her tone was just the same as always, but somehow I found her words hard to accept. She said there's nothing I can do about it, but it didn't seem as though she had very strong feelings that doing it for everyone's benefit, for instance. I also didn't get the impression self-sacrifice or devotion really jigged with her behavior. You mean you'd be fine with whatever? I tried. Like you were never really very attached to it, hanging out with kids in class or your connection with them? Was the way she could be so detached even when she's alone was being treated as if she doesn't exist? Connections with people and connecting with people. Connections with people and connecting with people. It's true. I'm not very good at that stuff. After she said that, May was silent for the briefest moments. How should I put it? I kind of wonder whether these things that everyone seems to want are so important. They seem a little unsettling sometimes. But maybe the bigger issue in this case is that, what? Suppose they hadn't picked me to be not there, and they'd picked someone else instead. Then I would have to stand next to everyone, go along with them, and treat that kid like they didn't exist. Isn't that way better to be cast out by everyone than having to do that? Don't you think? I could only give her an ambiguous nod. May moved suddenly away from me. I hurried after her and saw that ahead on the left, beside the road, there was a small playground. May was heading into it all alone, her feet seeming to glide beneath her. There was a tiny sandy area in the corner of the empty park, and beside it stood 2 iron bars at different heights. May grabbed onto the taller of these. Though higher, it was still a low bar meant for children, and lightly flipped herself over it, then rotated and landed solidly on the ground. In the dusky light of a street lamp, the silhouette of her black shirt and black jeans seemed to flutter and dance. Struck momentarily dumb, I chased after May into the park. Leaning back on the bar and arching her back, she let out an It was a fed-up sigh, unlike anything I'd heard from her up until now. That's how it sounded. I walked up to the other bar without a word and matched May's pose. She seemed to have been waiting for that. By the way, Sakakibara, the gaze of her right eye, obscured by her eye patch, arrested me. There's still something important we haven't talked about. Yeah? Come on. How you've become the same as me now. Oh. Right. There was that. The things that had happened at school today that gave me a personal experience of a decision that the class had enacted on May, from my perspective, of course, it was a huge issue. You can probably pretty much imagine why they did it. Even so, not to sound craven, but I could honestly say that I hadn't gotten my thoughts that far ordered yet. Maybe she guessed that because May started to tell a story, her attitude like someone lecturing a thick-headed student. Mizuno's sister died, and Takabayashi died, so there are already 2 deaths of June, so there is no more doubting that this is an on-year. I'm sure everyone came to the natural conclusion that the talisman wasn't working because you talked to me. Even the people who only half believed it before couldn't half believe it anymore. I couldn't answer. So then, what should they do? If they let it go on, the disasters might keep on coming. More people would die. And they say that once it starts, it won't stop. But there must be a way to stop it. Even if it can't be stopped, maybe there's a way the disasters can be weakened. That's how people normally think. I spread both my arms out to grip the bar I was leaning back against. My palms were pretty sweaty, and they slipped against the metal. May went on talking. They probably consider 2 strategies there. 2? Yeah. One would be to pull you into line now, at least, and do everything they could to keep treating me like I'm not there, but that might be too weak. Even if it had some effect, you could hardly call it a decisive blow. I see. At least I was getting the idea. The moment Miss Mizuno's death had become known, the kind of discussion May was talking about had had been held. That had been last Thursday, after I had been released by the detectives from a Yomayama PD. I'd gone back to the classroom, but there had been no one there. It was the period for our extended homeroom in order to have a discussion without me finding out. They had gone to the conference room in Building S, like Mochizuki had told me. Then, the other obtuse methods was, when I said that, May nodded quietly and picked up where I had left off. Raise the number of people who are not there to 2. Huh? And they figured that by doing that, maybe they'd be able to strengthen the effect of a talisman. As for who suggested it, maybe it was the tactical officer, Akazawa. From the very beginning, she seemed like, how do I put it? A hardliner about this issue. I could believe that Izumi Akazawa's being chosen as the class representative for the girls that day might have had an effect on other developments in the class. At any rate, they talked about the strategy going forward and deciding to do that. Then today, you became the same as me. That gathering this morning had been held to confirm the additional countermeasures they were going to carry out starting today. They had been held in secret from me when I got news of Iko Takabayashi's death over the weekend. But look, even so, I couldn't completely accept it. That kind of thing, there's no guarantee it'll have any effect, and yet they go that far anyway? I told you, everyone is desperate. May's words were forceful. Excuse me. In May and June, 4 people actually died. If things go on like that, it could be next, or their parents or siblings. If you think about it in concrete terms, it's not too crazy. Yeah, that was true. If you suppose that every month a sacrifice would be taken at random from the people related to 3rd year class 3, it could even be May next, or me. It could be Kurika, May's mother, whom I just met, or it could be my grandparents. It didn't seem possible, but could I even get my dad away in India? I could picture it in my mind, but I still just didn't have a sense of immediacy that May was talking about. Do you think it's illogical? She asked me. Instantly I replied, yeah, I do. How about if you think about it like this? May leaned her back away from on the bar and turned to face me. Without so much as holding down her hair as the wind scattered it, she said, there may not be a guarantee, but if there's even the slightest chance that this strategy will put a stop to the disasters, isn't that good enough? I always thought so. That's why I agreed to be the one who's not there. I couldn't say anything. It's not like there's anyone in the class who's my best friend, as everyone likes to call them. What Mr. Kubadera said about needing to overcome the suffering together and graduating the class feels totally creepy and totally fake. It's true, but it's sad when people die. Even if I won't feel the sadness directly, there are plenty of other people who will. Incapable of responding, I fixed my eyes on the movement of May's lips. We don't know yet if these additional countermeasures will be effective, but if the 2 of us stop existing, maybe that will put a stop to any further calamities. Maybe nobody will have to be sad because someone died. If there's even a whisper of a chance that's true, I think that's alright. As I listened to May talk, the words Mochizuki had spoken to me on Saturday came to mind. Just tell yourself that it's for everyone's benefit. Please. Oh. Ah, that was weird. Anyways. But I couldn't care less about pretty ideals like this. But I couldn't care less about pretty ideals like that. Even the way May was explaining it now, the phrase for everyone's benefit carried still another nuance. I could sense that, and plus, if I were to roll over now and accept that it would be treated as if I were not there, if I did that, how would that affect my and May's relationship, I wonder? We'd be able to interact without having to worry about what anyone else thought, as the 2 fellow non-existers in the class. At any rate, it would have to be completely non-existent to everyone, which meant, from our perspective, that everyone else in the class besides us would become not there. And right then, I thought maybe that would be okay too. Where was I? It came alongside a faint bewilderment, a faint regret, and a faint fidgetness whose true shape not even I could really grasp. We left the park and went up the road along the levee on the Yomiyama River. The round moon in the night sky tinging the spaces between the clouds. Finally, at the foot of the bridge that crossed the river, we parted ways. Thanks. Take care going home, I told her. If you believe the stuff you told me today, you're just as close to death as Sakuragi and Miss Mizuno were, so... You're the one who needs to be careful, Sakakibara, she answered unflippantly, then struck the tip of her right middle finger diagonally across the eye patch that covered her left eye. I'll be fine. How could she say that with such certainty? Something about it seemed odd, and I narrowed my eyes. As I did so, May dropped her hand from her eye patch and reached it out towards me. I look forward to not existing with you tomorrow, Sakakibara. She shook my hand lightly, her hand feeling surprisingly cold, but my own body felt glowing heat, as if fired up by the sensation. She spun around and walked off down the street we came by. I could only see her from the back, so I couldn't say for certain, but I thought I saw her hands pull the eye patch from her left eye then. I had at some point sunk into sleep, but I was jerked out of it. The cell phone I had tossed to one side of my bed was vibrating, flashing a tiny green light. Who could that be? It was pretty late at night. Could Teshigawara want something? Or maybe... I sprawled to my stomach and stretched a hand out for the phone. Heya! At the very first word, I knew what my caller was. I absently muttered, "What do you want?" when she heard, Now, I shouldn't need a reason." My father, Yosuke, was calling from a scorching foreign land. It had been a long time since he last called, I thought. But what timing? I bet India is hot. Is it night there? I just had curry for dinner. How are you doing? Physically, I'm fine. My father probably didn't know about the string of deaths among my classmates and their family. I probably ought to tell him, but then I'd have to mention the things I'd heard from May today, and... After some thought, I decided not to. Even if I told him a simplified version, it probably wouldn't come across very well. And if I wanted to give him the full explanation, that would take too much time. And besides, supposedly there was the rule that you can't even tell your family. Then maybe you're not actually supposed to know. The last time I run into May in the basement and display room of Twilight of Yomi, she had told me something similar. If you found out, then maybe... What she meant by that? That if I never found out about it, and the risk of death was ever so slightly lower or something? That was something to consider too. I decided to avoid any very complex topics on this international phone call and tried approaching my father from a different angle. Hey, this may sound strange. What's that? You in love? Cut it out. It's nothing that stupid. Oh, so sorry. Did Mom ever tell you any memories she had from middle school? Say what? I got the impression that my dad was pretty gobsmacked on the other end of the call. Why are you asking that again out of the blue? Mom went to the same middle school that I'm going here, North Yomi Middle School. Do the words third year class 3 mean anything to you? My dad mumbled frowningly, then was silent for several seconds. However, the answer he gave me after all that came down to one word. Nope. Nothing at all? Well, I mean, she probably did tell me stories about middle school, but then if you're asking me to retell them now, was Ritsuko in third year class 3 then? I guess this was the memory power of a man over 50. By the way, Koichi, this time my dad asked me the question. It's 2 months you've been there, so how does Yomiyama seem a year and a half later? Not much different? I cocked my head. The phone still pressed my ear. A year and a half later? But this is the first time I've been here since starting middle school. Huh? That doesn't seem right. There was a crack of interference from my father's voice, and it crackled. I held the phone away from my ear for a second. Oh, right, I recalled. This room's got terrible reception. I checked the bars on the edge of the screen. There was just barely one bar, but the interference was getting worse and worse. The cracking getting even more suffocating, like static. I made out my father's voice through the snapping interference. Right, you're right. I must be remembering wrong about... His tone sounded as if he had just then remembered something, but the rest was obscured by interference and grew increasingly unclear. In the end, the call dropped completely. I gazed down at the 0 bars on my LCD screen for a little bit, then lazily set the phone down beside my pillow. All at once, a shudder ran through me like a powerful chill. My whole body, no, not just my physical body, the same shudder went through my mind too. I'm scared. One beat later, the words came. I'm scared. Terrified. It was these feelings that made me shudder. The saga concerning third year class 3 that I'd heard from Mamisaki today, it was because of that. It hadn't been so bad as I was listening or for a little while after, but now all of a sudden, there was a time lag, like the sore muscles that came after exercise. I felt as if the translucent gauze that had been obscuring the reality of events behind in a kind of tenseness had abruptly disappeared. Laid bare, touched by shades of the utmost reality, terror assaulted me. Third year class 3 is the closest to death. We've drawn nearer to death. If they let go on, the disasters might keep coming. They say that once it starts, it won't stop. If everything May said was true, and on top of that, if the additional countermeasures that have begun today aren't effective, that meant someone else would get dragged to their death. It could be me. There was a chance, of course. God, it's a little late for that. There were 30 students in third year class 3, 28 minus Sakuragi and Takabayashi. For convenience sake, say the targets were limited only to the students in the class. Then there was, simplistically speaking, a 1 in 28 chance that this very night I could. The tragedy of Yukari Sakuragi that I had witnessed and Miss Mizuno's elevator accident that I had heard over the phone as it was happening. They tangled and melted into one another and became a somber, crooked net spreading over my heart like a spiderweb. There in the middle of it, the scratches on May's desk in the classroom flitted suddenly in tight close-up through my brain. Who is the casualty? Okay. Gonna get a drink of water, and then maybe I'll check out one more chapter, and then we'll end it here for the night. Bit of a shorter stream this time, but that's okay. We're gonna be streaming tomorrow. We're gonna be streaming Genshin tomorrow. I'm excited! Okay. I believe they are supposed to be updating it tonight. Maybe, if not, then oh well. Chapter 10, June 5. The next day, a particular lifestyle began at North Yomi. It was unpleasant at first, obviously. I knew the answer to how could they, but only felt all the more out of place and rebellious because of it. Intellectually, it was understandable, but emotionally, I couldn't accept it. Every single person in the class, including the teachers, treated May and me as if we didn't exist. In response, May and I treated everyone else as if they weren't there. What a twisted, unnatural situation. Still, no matter how warped or bizarre, gradually people get used to the situation they find themselves in. Since the rules were crystal clear, I could say it was a couple steps up from how terrible I'd felt at my last school. As day after day went by, I started to see things really might not be that bad. That idea started to win out. It's not so bad. I mean, compared to the unsettling situation of only a few days ago, when the what and the why had been obscure, this is way better. On a totally different level, I'd say yeah, it probably was better. The solidarity of Mamisaki and me alone out of the entire class. In other words, it's equivalent to freedom, for us alone. Like, maybe. I would entertain slightly childish fantasies at times. Now, no matter how May and I behaved in the classroom of third year class 3, no matter what we talked about, no one would be able to say a word about it. They all had to pretend they saw nothing and heard nothing. Even if May dyed her hair some crazy color, even if I suddenly busted out singing in the middle of class, or did a handstand on top of my desk, even if we started loudly discussing plans to rob a bank, even then, everyone would most likely continue pretending that they couldn't see or hear us. Not even if we were to embrace like lovers in the middle of the row. Whoa, hold on, Koichi, calm down. Speak of the devil, he actually does say that. Hold on there, Koichi. Better put the brakes on the run-of-the-mill fantasies like that, given the present circumstances. Got that, kid? I love how it's in italics, like the author is speaking to the character. Anyway, in a certain sense, this offered an incredibly peaceful, low-key environment that I never could have achieved in an ordinary school setting. I interpreted the situation that way too. And yet, behind the calm and the tranquility, naturally tension and weariness lingered, anxiety and fear from dread. Inescapable, all brought out. Inescapable. Brought out by the constantly wondering whether disasters for this year were going to keep happening. So I'd gone a little after a week after this phase of our lives had begun. Even when June was half over, there had been no new incidents. I think the number of times May stayed home from school and skipped classes during this period dropped considerably. On the other hand, it went up for me, no question about it. But though the issue would normally have been and to cause alarm for an educator, the head teacher, Mr. Kubadera, never reprimanded me for it. In no way could he inform my grandparents, who were my guardians here in Yomiyama. According to May, when there were parent-teacher conferences for high school placement counseling or whatever else, they arranged for a different teacher to sit in on the meeting with the student who was not there. From time to time, the assistant teacher, Miss Mikami, acted deeply agonized too. I'd be lying if I said that didn't bother me. But I couldn't exactly voice my complaints to her. I really don't think I could have. I was following along fine in class. The teachers would most likely massage my attendance record, and if I could knock out the exams, what was the problem? Barring anything crazy happening, getting into high school was going to be a breeze thanks to my dad's connections, so these little rebellions have been my only option. And the thought rose all on its own. Nothing wrong with that, is there? May and I, the two non-existers, would often go up to the roof of Building C on days when it wasn't raining. We ate lunch up there together, and sometimes too. I had my grandmother's homemade lunch as usual. May would typically nibble on some bread while drinking tea from a can. Karika doesn't make your lunches for you? Sometimes when she feels like it. May's answer to my question was indifferent, without any serious moaning or self-pity. Maybe once or twice a month, but to be honest, they taste awful. Do you cook for yourself or anything? Nope. And here again, the shake of her head was indifferent. I could heat up ready-made stuff, but that's about it. Isn't that what everyone does? I'm good at cooking, actually. You are? I was in the Culinary Arts Club at my last school. That's different. Not something I wanted to hear from May. Then could you cook me something sometime? Well, sure, one of these days, I replied after a moment's flustered hesitation. How far in the future would that a day be? The thought half-formed, occurring to me as I answered. Speaking of, you used to be in the art club, right? When I was in first year, yeah. I've known Mochizuki since back then. What about now? What do you mean? Are you in the art club now? There was no art club in second year, or I guess I mean, they put the club on hiatus. But it started back up this April, right? Yeah, I showed up a couple times in April, but once May started, that was it. Meaning she couldn't go there anymore because she'd become not there. Was Miss Mikami the sponsor in your first year too? There was a slight pause, during which May glanced at my face before replying, Miss Mikami was too, yeah. There was another art teacher who was the main sponsor, but in our second year, that teacher transferred to another school, so then the club had gone on hiatus for for a year until Miss Mikami made up her mind to take on sole sponsorship of the club, huh? I see. That reminds me. You were drawing a picture up here once, remember? The first time we met up here? You had a sketchbook with you. Did I? I saw you with the same sketchbook in the secondary library, too. Did you finish the picture you were drawing? For now. She'd been drawing a picture of a beautiful girl with ball joints. I remember how May had said, I'm going to give this girl huge wings last of all. Did you put on the wings yet? Yeah, sure. May's eyes lowered, hiding a shadow of sadness. I'll let you see it one of these days. Okay. One of these days, huh? How far in the future would that be? As we progressed through this undeniably trivial conversation, I felt as if we spent a lot of time talking about me. Though I wasn't fielding an unusual number of questions, I talked about my dad being in India, about my dead mother, about my life before I came to Yomayama, and about my life after, about my grandparents, Ritsuko, and my collapsed lung, and being hospitalized. Miss Me's no. But unless I asked May a specific question, she didn't make any effort to talk about herself. In fact, even when I asked her something, most of the time she would resist answering or dance around the issue. What do you do for fun? Draw pictures? I even tried asking her questions formally like that. Actually, I like looking at pictures more than I like drawing them, I think. Oh yeah? Even when I only mean art books, really. We have a ton of them at my house. Even then, I only mean art books, really. We have a ton of them at my house. Have you ever been to an art exhibit? Living in a rural town like this, you'll get a lot of opportunities for that. She told me she preferred the Western art that predated Impressionism, and that she didn't actually care for pictures like the one her mother, Karika, painted. What about dolls? I asked on an impulse. What do you think of the dolls Karika makes? Do you not really like those either? Well, you know. In a reflection of her words, an ambiguous cloud came over her expression. I don't hate them, and there are some that I like, but... I decided not to push any further. On the most light-hearted tone I can manage, I said, You should come visit me in Tokyo sometime. We'll go visit the art museums. I'll show you around. Okay. Someday. Someday. How far or in the future would that have been from this moment? Again, the thought rose in my mind, unbidden. Let me see. Da-da-da. Seems like a good place. Okay. You want to take a peek in the art club room? It was during lunch on Thursday, June 18th, when May suggested this. It had been pouring rain all day, so there was no way we could eat on the roof. Still, the two of us were not there, were reluctant to eat in the classroom like everyone else. When fourth period ended, it was as if we signaled to each other immediately. We both got up from our desks and left the classroom. That was when May made the suggestion. I could think of less interesting places to go, so I quickly agreed. Sure. The art club room was on the first floor of Building 0, all the way at the western end. Originally, the room had been a regular classroom, but now it was divided in two, with half being used as the art club room and the next room over being the culture club's room. There was a placard hanging on the door that read, Local Historical Society. Oh, someone cried out as soon as we went in. There were already someone inside. Two girls I had never seen before. Judging from the colors on their name tags, one was a second year and the other was a first year. The second year had a narrow, calm face and ponytail, while the first year had a major baby face and glasses with red frames. Misaki-senpai, a second year with a ponytail explained. She blinked in wonder. What are you? I felt like coming over, May replied with her usual dryness. Didn't you quit the club? I'm just taking a break from it. Oh, really? This is the first year with glasses. It seemed that these girls hadn't been let in on the special situation of third year class 3, though since there was a rule of not telling anyone outside of class, that wasn't surprising. They began talking to May in such a perfectly normal way, which is better proof than anything. Who's that? The second year asked, looking at me. May quickly replied, My classmate, Sakakibara. He's friends with Mochizuki, too. Oh, really? The first year, her reply was exactly in the same tone, as if she were replaying a default recording. Her expression was exactly the same, too, and she had kind of a bashful smile. This might not be so awesome for me. He said he's interested in the art club, so I brought him over, May said, offering just enough of an explanation. Oh, really? Are you going to join? The second year asked, throwing me completely off kilter. I wasn't going to. I don't know. As I struggled through my response, May slipped right past the two girls. I followed her lead and walked into the room. It was kept much more neatly than I expected somehow. In the middle of the room, there were two big work tables exactly like the ones in the art room. One wall had been made into lockers for the club members, and on the opposite wall were big steel shelves with art supplies and a bunch of other stuff neatly arranged on them. Mochizuki hasn't changed, May remarked, walking up to one of several easels that had been set up in the room. Looking at it, I saw a copy of Munich's Scream. No, not an exact copy. The background details were probably pretty different from the original. A painting, and the man with the hands over his ears kind of looked like Mochizuki. And at precisely that moment, in walked Yuya Mochizuki himself. Oh, senpai! Mochizuki-senpai! Hearing the two girls' voices, I turned around, and there at the door was Mochizuki. The second he saw us, his face transformed, as if he had run smack into a ghost or something. Could you two come with me for a second? Now? He said to the girls, keeping his eyes off us. I need your help with something, right away. Oh, really? But Misaki-senpai is actually here for once. Just come with me. And so Mochizuki left the room, practically dragging the two girls with him. Turning back to the pseudo-scream on the easel, May let out a quiet snicker. It was infectious, and I stifled my own laughter. It would be tough to ignore us as if we were not there with two outsiders present, since they didn't know what was going on, and of course he couldn't explain that to him. That's why he needed to get out of there in any way he could. But what exactly was Mochizuki going to conjure up for those girls to help with right away? As my imagination worked it over, I started to feel sorry for him. May moved away from the pseudo-scream and headed towards the back of the room. She pulled something from the shadows of the lockers. A white cloth had been wrapped around the entire thing, but the shape of it told me that this, too, was an easel. May gently pulled the cloth away. A French-sized 10 canvas sat on it backward. May gave a low sigh and then turned the canvas around to the front. It was a half-finished oil painting, and I didn't need to ask to know that this had belonged to May. The canvas showed a portrait of a woman dressed in black. Her features revealed at a glance that it was her mother. However, bizarrely, the face was split in two. From the top of her head, through her forehead, to her eyebrow, nose, and mouth, her entire face was ripped open in a V shape, such as the subject of the painting. On the right half of the torn face, I could discern a faint smile, and on the left, an expression of sorrow. The painting showed no blood and no structures, so it didn't seem graphic at all, but it was pretty grotesque and in pretty terrible taste. At least they didn't throw it out, I guess, May murmured. If someone like Akazawa were in the art club instead of Mochizuki? She might have destroyed it on the rationale that the painting of someone who's not there can't be allowed to exist. And that's probably what May was implying. You're going to take it home? I asked. No. May gave a slight shake of her head and turned the canvas back around. She wrapped the cloth around the easel and returned it to the shadow of the lockers. Right as we came out of the art club and back into the hall, we ran into Miss Mikami. Naturally, we had to ignore her, and she had to ignore us. I understood that, but my steps started to inadvertently stop for just one moment. Maybe that was why Miss Mikami came to a stop too, then turned her eyes away from us uncomfortably. I thought I saw her lips tremble as if to say something, but it might have been my imagination. It all happened in the brief span of a few seconds in the dimly lit hall, after all. On Thursday's 5th period, our next class was art with Miss Mikami, but we weren't planning to go. Due to the nature of the class, the teacher and the rest of the class obviously had it easier than the two non-existers were absent. Same with the extended homeroom in 6th period. What are we doing for next period? I asked May in a low voice as we walked side by side to the hall. Let's go to the library, she answered. The secondary library, obviously. We might as well eat lunch there, too. Thus, when the bell to start 5th period rang, we were in the secondary library. When we arrived, there was no one else there, no sign of the librarian, Mr. Chibiki. May sat down in one of the chairs that circled the large table and started reading a book she had brought with her. I had only caught a glimpse of the title when she took it out of her bag, The Lonely Crowd. What kind of book was that, I wondered. It seemed completely alien to the genre Miss Mizuno and I specialized in, too, at least. I borrowed it from the main library, May said, her eyes cast down on the open book. The title kind of spoke to me. The Lonely Crowd. It's written by a man named Reisman, David Reisman. Heard of him? Nope. It seems like something your dad would have in his library. Ah, that interesting of a book, huh? Is it interesting? I guess. I went over to stand before the same bookshelf Mr. Chibiki had pointed out to me the last time I had been here by myself. In exactly the same spot I remembered, I found the item I sought. Oop. Accidentally turned up the volume of my ears. Oops. There we go. Okay. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Is it interesting? I guess. Oh, wait. I found the item I sought, the yearbook for 1972. I took it down from the shelf and went back to the big table. I chose a spot 2 seats down from May and sat down, then opened the yearbook. It wasn't because I wanted to see how my mother had looked in middle school again. I remembered something I wanted to check. I found the page for 3rd year class 3 and scrutinized the group photo on the left-hand page. 5th from the right, in the 2nd row, was my mother, as a 3rd year middle schooler, smiling a little tensely. Diagonally in front of her, standing a slight distance from the rows of students, all the way to the right side, was a man, wearing a pale blazon on his willowy frame, one hand resting on his hip, giving a cheerier smile than any of the students. It was... yeah, that's what I thought. Which one's your mom? May's voice came from behind me, surprising me so badly I almost shouted. For crying out loud, we were barely 3 meters apart. How did I not notice her standing there? Getting my nerves under control, I pointed to the photo. Her. May peered at the yearbook over my shoulder, staring intently at the image of my mother's face. Ritsuko, huh? She muttered. I can see it. Finally she nodded, apparently satisfied, and she pulled out a chair to my right, sat down on the edge of it, and asked me this. What did your mom die from? Oh. Unconsciously, I let out a sigh. She gave birth to me here, and then that summer, it was July. She wasn't doing too well afterward. She caught a cold that turned into something worse. Oh. That had been 15 years ago. I guess more accurately, doing the math, it had been 14 years and 11 months ago. Anyway, did you know this? I asked the question this time. Surreptitiously, I watched May's face in profile. I thought the eye patch over her left eye looked dirtier than usual today. Look at the head teacher for 3rd year class 3. The man in the pale blazon on the right edge of the group photo. He comes off totally different now, huh? May replied. This is the first time I had seen a photo from back then. Oh yes, the head teacher for our class is a handsome young man. He taught social studies and supervised theater club or something along those lines. He's quite the fired-up educator. I believe his students thought well of him. Yes, that's what my grandmother had said as she arced back through her memories. She'd been talking about the man in this picture. Even if he was in his mid-20s 26 years ago, he would be over 50 now. The ages matched up, but when I looked at this yearbook last time and noticed him, just like May, I thought how much he had changed in 26 years. I took the name of the teacher printed below the photo, just to be sure, and I was right. It said, Mr. Ayatsuji Chibiki. Can I check something else? I asked, lifting my eyes from the yearbook and turning on them on May. Last week at your house, when you explained all the stuff that's been going on, you kept saying that you heard it from someone. Was that right? You are. May nodded, an amused smile on her face. I was talking about Mr. Chibiki. Soon after that, Mr. Chibiki, the master of the secondary library, appeared. It was right after I returned the 1972 yearbook on the shelf. Oh, two of you today, huh? He called over to us, after realizing we were there, then went immediately behind his counter. That was all he said. He was dressed in his usual all-black clothes and black-rimmed glasses, and his salt-and-pepper straw-like hair complemented his pale, skinny face. He really was a far cry from the fired-up educator my grandmother recalled. We're up to two people being not there, May answered, getting up from her chair. Resting both elbows on the counter, Mr. Chibiki said, So, it would seem. I heard something about it. Do you think it's going to work? Well, now. His expression hardened ever so slightly before he answered. Can't say, to be honest. It's never been attempted before. His eyes shifted to me. You understand the situation now. Sakakibara, right? Yes, but... There we go. Yes, but you don't believe it? That's not it. Well, yes, it is. Part of me still can't believe it and believe in it completely, I guess. I see. Excuse me. Huh. His elbows were resting on the counter. The all-in-black librarian dug his fingers into his hair. I suppose I can't blame you. If I were in your position, I heard a story like that out of the blue. Absolutely. His hand paused, his hair still caught in its grip, and his eyebrows pinched together sharply. However, he continued, this is true. It's a phenomenon that is actually taking place in our school, in our town of Yamiyama. A phenomenon, huh? The words May had spoken last week credited someone rose from memory. It isn't anything a person could have done. It's the kind of phenomenon it is. She'd used a similar term. She also told me that's why this is different from what you call a curse. When I realized that someone was the person standing in front of me now, all sorts of details seemed to come together. As I tried to imagine, and the fact that this man, who had been the head teacher for third year class 3 26 years ago, and now, 26 years later, switched roles to become a librarian, was still at school, as I tried to imagine how it happened, I stood up and walked over to stand before the counter, next to May. So you were a social studies teacher, and you sponsored the theater club, and 26 years ago, you were in charge of third year class 3. So you knew my mother. That's right. I suppose you realized that when you came here, or last time I looked at the yearbook. Yeah, but how did you wind up here? That's a difficult question to answer. I'm sorry. No need to apologize. Misaki didn't tell you about it. Misaki didn't tell you about it? I glanced over at May. No, she didn't. I see. Aw. Give me one moment, guys. I gotta let my cat in. He wants me let in. Come here, sweetie. Give me 1 second. Zipper! Oh, sweetie. I'm coming. Don't worry. I'll let you in. There we go. Hi, big guy. Hello. Oh my goodness, you got big. Hi. You're so cute. Come here. You want to say hi? He's a bit of a chatty baby. Want to say hi, Chip? It's okay. Here we go. Want to say hi? Up to you. Oh. Oh no! He has heard the sound of a can opening and went running. I almost ate shit fucking laying him out. I almost ate shit letting him out for a second. I tripped over my purse. Oh my god. Anyways, continuing. I see. Mr. Chibiki looked over at the clock on the wall. A little more than 30 minutes had passed since the start of 5th period. You have art this period on Thursdays, don't you? I suppose you'll both be missing the extended homeroom next period, too. May and I exchanged a quick look, and then we both nodded. We thought everyone would feel better if we weren't there. No doubt. You made the right decision. Sir, I decided to pose a question that had just occurred to me. Is it alright if you're not just Is it alright that you're not ignoring us? Could you stop calling me sir? Mr. Chibiki is fine. Oh, alright. It's because I don't have any ties to your class, you see. Those with no direct links to your 3rd year class 3 are what you might call safe. So even if I interact with you two normally, it shouldn't have any effect. Yes, of course. Obviously, that's why May was able to come in here now and then to get all that information out of him. Now, as for your previous question, Mr. Chibiki continued, lowering himself into a chair on the other side of the counter. Why don't I take this opportunity to tell you a story? Misaki here has only seen the fragments of it before. To be honest, I don't like to speak too much about what happened 26 years ago, though I may be the last person at the school who's directly experienced the event. 3rd year class 3, 26 years ago. The death of Misaki was popular with everyone, and then nobody had any ill intentions. Mr. Chibiki said in a low, pinched voice. I was still young and clung to certain ideals as an educator. I behaved I thought was right. The students did the same, though now I find it a frivolous way of thinking. As a result, that became the trigger, and in a manner of speaking, the doors of death swung open at the school. I bear the responsibility for that. I also feel responsible for being unable to stop the disasters that began the following year. And that's why I've stayed at the school. I quit being a teacher and became a librarian, which was, in part, running away. Running away? I cut in inadvertently. How was that running away? Half of the reason I stopped being a teacher was a guilty conscience, that I had no right to be a teacher, but the other half was stark fear that I had become the head teacher for 3rd year class 3 again. I might be dragged to my death next. So I ran away. Do teachers die too? If they're the head teacher or the assistant teacher, yes, because they're members of 3rd year class 3. The teachers who merely supervise classes are out of range. Oh, so then, I realized something then. The way Yuya Mochizuki has been constantly obsessing over how much Miss Mikami had been out lately, so that hadn't just been him worrying about the health of the teacher he was crushing on. He had truly been concerned that the next of the calamities might have befallen her, or since she was the assistant teacher for our class. But that's why I ran away, Mr. Chibiki repeated. But I didn't want to run away from school entirely. By a lucky chance, the position here in the library became available, so I decided to hunker down right here, to always be right here, to watch how things unfold. But now that I've gotten ahead of myself. Mr. Chibiki's lips curved with a fair amount of self-deprecation, and he shook his head slowly back and forth. That was the point at which I asked, the Misaki from 26 years ago, was it a boy or a girl? He was a boy. I got my answer as if it were nothing. Misaki was his first name, written in the character for Cape, as in Cape Cod. What was his last name? Yomiyama. Excuse me? It was Yomiyama, the same as the name of his town. His full name was Misaki Yomiyama. His last name is Yomiyama? Well, I guess, like Mr. Adachi living in the Adachi ward, or Miss Musashino from Musashino City. I looked over at May. May looked over at me, too, then shook her head slightly. She probably meant I didn't know that until now either. So Misaki was in a plane crash or something? I asked, checking the story with him. It was a fire. The answer was just as easy as the last one. A story like this typically changes and gets embellished as it passes from person to person. For some reason, a version involving a plane crash seems to have caught on, but it was actually a house fire. One night in May, Misaki Yomiyama's house was completely destroyed in a fire. His entire family died, his parents as well as his little brother, who was 1 year younger than him. What caused it? No one knows. They decided at least that it hadn't been a crime. though there's a version of the story that says it was a meteorite. Seriously? Misaki's house was on the western outskirts of town, near Asamidai. There was testimony that a huge shooting star was seen falling near there that night, so people say that it could have started the fire, though I never heard that any trace of it was ever identified, so this is nothing more than another rumor, I suppose. Those are the facts surrounding the death of Misaki Yomiyama 26 years ago, as I remember them. However, Mr. Chibiki's eyes dropped to his hands. His voice grew even lower as he added, "However, I have no confidence that my memories are entirely correct." What? It could be that there is a gap, or that a revision has been made to some part of them, without my ever realizing it. And I don't mean simply because the memories are from long ago. How should I put it? If I don't continually work very hard to pay attention, my memories of these events tend to get fuzzy, more than any of the other clutter in here. I don't know why, but that's how it seems, though it may not quite click for the two of you even when I explain it. Feedback from entering the realm of the legend. Those are the words in the image that popped suddenly into my mind. What about the group photo after graduation where Misaki showed up even though he couldn't have possibly been there? I asked. Mr. Chibiki, did you see it? I did. Mr. Chibiki nodded, then cast his gaze up to the ceiling for a moment. I was in that photo too, in the old classroom here in the former school building. A few days later, the students began to get stirred up, and several of them brought the photo in to question me. They shoved it to me. It absolutely looked like the dead boy was in it, Misaki Yomiyama. In fact, I do believe that Ritsuko was one of the ones who came to me back then. My mom? As I remember it, that is. Do you still have the photo? No. Mr. Chibiki's mouth drew tight. They made another print of it for me, but I threw it away. Seeing everything that happened after that, I got scared, to be honest. I even thought disasters were happening because the thing existed. I sighed, and tiny goosebumps prickled up on my arms. Let's skip ahead, shall we? Mr. Chibiki said, dropping his eyes to his hands once more. The next year I was in charge of the first year class, so I only knew what happened in third year class 3 that year from a third person perspective. How they were short one desk and chair at the start of the first semester, how at least one of the students in the class or their relatives died each month. And when I heard the stories, I never actively made the connection to what had happened the year before. All I did was feel sad at the terrible misfortunes they continued to suffer. In the end, 16 people with a connection to the class lost their lives in that 1 year. Once the graduation ceremony was over, the teacher in charge of third year class 3 told me something. It seems that one extra student had made their way into the class for the year. That an extra person who couldn't have possibly been there had infiltrated the class. He said that as soon as the graduation ceremony was over, the student disappeared. And that was when he finally realized that Misaki's little brother was the extra person who couldn't possibly have been there, since he died the year before? So it seems, but the edges of Mr. Chibiki's lips twitched, and he hesitated for several moments before answering. It feels more correct to tell you that in all honesty, I couldn't say. Hasn't Miss Misaki here told you? Those directly involved in this phenomenon plaguing third year class 3 can't hold on to their memories about who the extra person in the class was for very long. The memory fades in time and then it disappears. The fact is, by the time... Oh, wait. There it is. The fact is, by the time a month had passed, the teacher who revealed the situation to me had completely forgotten what had occurred, and even my memory of it was becoming unreliable. It's only that I made notes about it in my notebook at the time that I could barely recall it. Suppose the levee breaks and the water from the river floods the town. It's like the water is finally receding. The metaphor May had told me last week, heard from someone. The fact that there was a flood remains, unquestioningly, but after the water recedes, the memory of what got flooded and how badly starts to get fuzzy. It's like that. It's more that they can't help forgetting. Not that they're forced to forget, I guess. The same sort of phenomenon happened into the next year's third year class 3 as well. Many people died. Those involved began to recognize that this was odd and something was going on, and then Mr. Chibiki tangled the fingers of his right hand in his straw-like hair, mussing it wildly. And then the year after that, in 1976, I was assigned to take charge of third year class 3 again. That was when I experienced it, as a member of a class that people had already begun to call cursed. The year before, 1975, had been an off year. Clinging to the hope that perhaps those things weren't going on anymore, Mr. Chibiki took over for third year class 3 in 1976. However, that was an on year. The result was that in 1 year, 5 students from third year class 3 and 9 of their immediate family members lost their lives, a total of 14 people. Accident followed on illness, followed on suicide, then murder. There were many ways that they died. Maybe it's this classroom that's cursed, Mr. Chibiki thought. So he appealed to the school and tried changing to a different classroom. That had been right after summer break. But still, the months of disasters never stopped. After the graduation ceremony in March, the extra person who couldn't possibly have been there, i.e., the casualty, vanished. And though he had been the head teacher for the class, Mr. Chibiki said he simply couldn't remember who the extra person had been. He collected information later on and found the name of a person who seemed to be a likely candidate, but the memories weren't there as something he had actually experienced. He had forgotten. At that point, he hadn't fully grasped this problem with the memories of those involved. As we listened to him tell the story, 5th period ended and the start of 6th period had left us far behind. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Over the course of this hour, it had grown quite heavy. The old grimy windows of the library shook as the wind and raindrops occasionally slapped against the glass. Then 3 years after that, I once again had the chance to be head teacher for third year class 3. I considered quitting my job, but I wasn't in a position to do it. I prayed for that year being an off year, but that's not what happened. Mr. Chibiki continued his tale in a low voice. May and I continued to listen, not moving a muscle, or even breathing. That year was the first that we tried a modest countermeasure suggested by the school. We changed the class designations from the old Class 1, Class 2, and so on to Class A, Class B, etc. Third year Class C became just simply a C. We thought that maybe if the name of a site were to change, the curse might be broken, but so it hadn't worked. I heard that from May, so I already knew about it. They considered and implemented all kinds of countermeasures, but none of them had any effect. Because finally, after all of the rest, they had found an effective way to counter the situation, namely this tactic of treating someone as though they're not there in place of the extra person in the class. I'm gonna get a quick drink of water. There we go. And reposition. There we go. Okay. The result was the same. Many people died that year too. Mr. Chibiki let out a long, frustrated sigh, and then looked up through his bangs to gauge our reactions. All he could manage was a silent nod. It seems that the extra person that year was a girl who had died in third year class 3 in 76. Once the graduation ceremony ended, and that became apparent, I immediately made a note of her name, so that even after my memories about the extra person had disappeared, I was able to assure myself that that's what it says happened. It was around this time that I also began to realize that the extra person who infiltrated the class seemed to be a casualty, appearing at random from the ranks of people who had just lost their lives in the disasters brought on about the phenomenon up to that point. Mr. Chibiki gave another long sigh. That was the last year before I quit being a teacher. It's been 18 years now. The principal at the time was adamant, and that talk of curse or whatever could not become public. But at the same time, he gave me what consideration he could, and I was able to remain at the school as a librarian. I've been in here ever since. in here, just keeping an eye on things, as I still do. I decided I would observe each year's phenomenon as a third party. And well, sometimes students pop up to talk with me, like you two did. Mr. Chibiki broke off, and then once again looked up to us to gauge our reactions. His face showed that the tension he had borne all through the conversation had eased considerably. I interjected. Can I ask you something? What's that? Misaki told me that while the extra person, the casualty, is hiding in the class, records and memories seem to get tampered with all over the place. So the details that I would normally never make sense do make sense, and no one realizes the true identity of the casualty. Does that really happen? It really does. I didn't detect even a breath of hesitation in Mr. Chibiki's answer, but it's no use asking why or how it's done, because no matter how much you question it, it can't be explained with perfect logic. All you can do is tell yourself that's how a phenomenon works. I couldn't say anything. Maybe you don't believe that? Well, it doesn't make me doubt the idea any more than I already did. I see. Mr. Chibiki languidly removed his glasses, then dug around in the pocket of his pants before pulling out a wrinkled handkerchief. He wiped his glasses clean for a long moment, then... Well then. Lifting his head, he restored his glasses to their place and fixed his eyes on us. Yes, I may as well show it to you. That's probably the fastest way. Then he opened a drawer in the desk built into the other side of the counter. After rummaging noisily through its contents for a few moments, he took something out. It was a binder with a big black cover. Have a look at these examples. They illustrate the situation pretty well. Mr. Chibiki held out the binder to us across the counter. I took it from him, my fingers resting nervously on the cover. I keep copies of a third-year Class 3 lists in here. 27 years worth, from 1972 through this year. They're filed in order from the newest list on top, so the years go backward. I turned back the cover as he explained the system, and he was right. The first 2 pages were for 1998. In other words, the class list for the current year, Class 3. Mr. Kubadera and Miss Mikami. The names of the head teacher and assistant teacher were proclaimed clearly, and below that stretched the list of students' last names. My name, Koichi Sakakibara, had been handwritten on the very last row of page 2, because I was a transfer student who just started late, and then, to the left of 2 names, Yukari Sakuragi and Ikuo Takabayashi, an X had been written in red pen. Their names and contact information were on the list, and in the space is to the right of someone, and in the space to the right, someone had written in beside Sakuragi, May 26th, accident at school, and same day, mother, Meiko, car accident, and besides Takabayashi, June 6th, illness. There was one other. In the space to the right of Takeru Mizuno's name was written, June 3rd, older sister, Sanae, accident at work. Take a look at the year before last. Last year had been an off year. That must be why he told me to look up the year before, I reasoned. I did, as I was told, and opened the page where the class list from 1996 had been filed. I'm sure you've already realized this, but the names of the red X beside them are the people who passed away that year. There are also notes on the date and the manner of their deaths. There are also similar notes when the family members have died, you see. Yes. I counted the number of X's next to the students' names for that year, and found there were 4. 3 names of family members who died. Altogether, there were 7 people. You see the name written at the very bottom of the second page in blue ink? Yes. Mami Asakura. That was the name. That was the casualty that year, Mr. Chibiki said. At my side, May's body jerked closer to me to examine the file in my hands. I could feel her breath right next to me, which scattered my thoughts in all directions. The girl named Mami Asakura was a student mixed up in the class from the beginning of April all the way to the graduation ceremony in March the following year, without anyone ever realizing that she was an extra person who couldn't possibly have been in there. Mr. Chibiki, I asked. There are 7 people who died that year. Meaning it wasn't at least one person dying a month, right? Yes. That's because they enacted the countermeasure that year. And they did? It was the talisman. I believe you become quite familiar with it by now. They treated someone in the class as if they were not there. Oh, right. They were successful too, so no one died in the first half of the year. But then, after the second semester began, something unexpected occurred. What does that mean? The student who had taken on the role of being not there couldn't bear the pressure and alienation any longer and compromised the class decision. The student started begging to them, saying, "You think I'm not here? But I am. Take a good look. Everybody, you're going to treat me like I'm here." The strain had become too great. You're saying that's why a disaster started? It seems that way. I couldn't help hearing a faint sigh from May's lips. I didn't know who they made not there that year, but because he, or maybe she, had abandoned that role partway through the year, 7 people linked to the class had lost their lives. How had he, or maybe she, taken this cruel fact? How had he faced everyone in class and himself? When I pictured it, tiny goosebumps rolled almost up on both my arms again. So, Mr. Chibiki continued, the casualty for 1996 was a student named Mami Asakura, whose name you see written there. But that name isn't actually in the class list for that year. She was originally a student in third year class 3 years earlier, in 1993. If you look back, you'll see that she lost her life in the disasters of that year. I flipped through the pages in the file and checked the class list for 1993. Just as Mr. Chibiki had said, Mami Asakura's name was listed there, right alongside a red X in the space to the right. He had written October 9th, illness. This is what I mean when I say that. At the time, everything is consistent, the way it's supposed to be, incidentally. Mr. Chibiki leaned forward across the counter and lightly flicked his index finger on the binder's edge. Between April 2 years ago and the following March, this didn't look like this. It didn't? As far as I remember anyway, in April 1996, Mami Asakura's name should have been on the class list, since she was part of the class. And I'm going off of memory now, but her name wasn't where it belonged on the class list for 93, which tells me that it disappeared. And of course that includes the X next to her name and in the note about her death. You're saying all of it disappeared? Yes. Mr. Chibiki nodded without a smile. You see, while a phenomenon is an effect for the given year, it doesn't matter where you search, you accomplish nothing. And it isn't just a class list. The same sort of thing happens in other records of the school and official documents, even to people's diaries, or notes, or photos, or videotapes, even computer data. It doesn't matter what it is. Some kind of tampering or corruption occurs that common sense would tell you is impossible. It conceals the contradictions that ought to arise when the casualty mixes in with everyone. Details that shouldn't match up just do. But it wasn't just things like records, was it? It affected the memories of the people involved too, right? Excuse me. That's right. Take the example of 2 years ago. Even in my role as an observer, I never had the slight... Goodness. Okay. That's right. Take the example of 2 years ago. Even in my role as an observer, I never had the slightest suspicion about the presence of Mami Asakura, even though she shouldn't have been there. In reality, she had passed away at the age of 14 in October 1993, but everyone had forgotten that fact. Her family, her friends, her teacher. Everyone. Not to mention that she was still 14 at the point that she slipped in as the casualty in 1996, and everyone believed the false reality that she was starting her third year. Absolutely no one doubted it. No one could have. The memories of the past and all other details that involved her were tampered with and altered to make sense of it. And so a year went by, and when the casualty vanished after the graduation ceremony, all of our memories and records finally went back to the way they were supposed to be. And all the people who had been close to her, the minds of people like her classmates and family who were at the core of it, They all lost their memories like she had never appeared as a casualty. My eyes fixed on the class list in the binder. My response died on my lips. That's beyond ludicrous. Even if I were to say it out loud, it wouldn't change a thing. That's how I felt. Why do these things happen? As I said before, the logic is utterly inscrutable, and the mechanisms behind it are inexplainable as well. It could very well be that no physical change is actually occurring to make names appear or disappear on the class list. I've tried to picture the situation that way. What do you mean? May was the one who asked that question. Deep vertical lines creased the skin between Mr. Chibiki's eyes. I mean that maybe the problem only arises in the minds of the people involved. Maybe it's us. Our minds are all interpreting physical changes that aren't actually happening as changes that are happening. Excuse me. Like collective hypothesis? Right. Maybe it's something like that. Centered on the school and extending outside of the entire town of Nomiyama, and sometimes further into the outside world. At that point, Mr. Chibiki gave another drawn-out sigh. Still, given that this is the irresponsible conjecture delusion that I've reached after long years as an observer, I have no evidence, and there's no way to prove it. Even if it could be proven, I don't know what it would mean. Neither of us could offer a response. Basically, I've given up. Mr. Chibiki lifted both of his hands in an echo of his words. You could say after all this time, there's pretty much only one thing that I've learned has any appreciable effect. That being the strategy you two are currently using. The strategy of turning someone in the class into someone who's not there. It's a strange countermeasure that someone thought up 10 years ago, I believe. But despite the years when the strategy successfully contains disaster, there are also cases like 2 years ago where the strategy fails partway through the year. 2 years ago. May's voice was unexpectedly reedy. Her body leaned snugly against mine again, and she looked down at the binder in my hands. Wasn't Miss Mikami the head teacher for 3rd year class 3 that year? What? As I started and looked at the class list again, and there it is. Miss Mikami's name was listed as the head teacher. Hey, you're right. You didn't know? Mr. Chibiki wore a faint look of surprise on his face. He tapped the center of his pale forehead with the tip of his right-hand middle finger. She must have had a terrible time with it, too. And then for her to become an assistant teacher of Class 3 again this year. Mr. Chibiki told us a few other stories about the phenomenon for a little while longer. Speaking for myself, I was getting a lot of information for the first time, but that couldn't have been more true for May. Didn't she already know more than a little what she was hearing? Information I was getting for the first time. One example of a rule all about the range for the disasters. Mr. Chibiki, the self-identified observer, had worked it out based on the facts he had recorded all this time. It seems the disasters only reach as far as the members of a class and their family members within 2 degrees. Mr. Chibiki told us that deep gravity, meaning parents, grandparents, and siblings, blood relationship is a condition as well. Never once has a relative with no blood ties died, like step-parents or step-siblings. I think it's safe to consider them out of range. Related by blood, huh? Man murmured the question. Parents, grandparents, siblings related by blood, so then aunts, uncles, and cousins weren't included. The range also includes the issue of geographic range. I believe I mentioned it earlier when the occurrence of this phenomenon centered around the school and town of Yomiyama. So it seems that the further away of the town you go, the weaker its effect on you. You mean if you go far enough away you're safe? To make a simplistic comparison, it's similar to getting no service on a cell phone. To date, there hasn't been a single case of a family member living in some other distant location being affected by the disasters. There are extremely few examples of someone who lives in Yomiyama dying outside of town. So, didn't that mean that if it came down to it, you could just leave town? Do you mind if I ask you something? The memory hit me suddenly and I wanted to ask. Did something ever happen on a class trip a long time ago? I wasn't surprised to see Mr. Chibiki's brows knit morosely at that. The tragedy of 87. Was that the bite of 87? I'm sorry. What? There was a terrible accident during the class trip of 1987. At the time, the class trip was held at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. I'm kidding. There was a terrible accident during the class trip on 1978. 87. At the same time, the class trip was held during the first semester of third year, but since the trips went and two other prefectures were out of range, in other words, the students of Class 3 had never been affected by the disasters. But then, the lines between Mr. Chibiki's brows furrowed even more deeply, and as he spoke, his voice betrayed the faintest hint of pain. That year, the students were put into buses by class number and then left Yomiyama for the airport. There was an accident on the way there. They were on the highway, right on the edge of town, when a truck going the opposite direction plowed into the bus and the students of Class 3 were riding on. The driver had been asleep at the wheel. My eyes widened as a stab went through my heart. I looked to my side to see May's reaction, but her expression hadn't changed in the slightest. She must have known about this already. The head teacher who had been riding with them, and 6 of the students in Class 3, died in the tragic accident. A total of 7 people. The bus behind theirs was involved in the accident as well, which resulted in a few collateral deaths outside of Class 3. So then, that's why they started having the class trip during second year? That's right. Mr. Chibiki nodded, his brow still furrowed. And not just the class trip either. They wouldn't even go on field trips. Ever since that tragedy, third years as a unit no longer have any activities in which students get on buses and leave school. Just then, the crackling bell announced the end of 6th period began to ring. Mr. Chibiki glanced at the clock on the wall and slumped into the chair on the other side of the counter. He removed his glasses and once again began to polish them with his handkerchief. Let's leave it at that for today. I warmed up my topic and talked much too long, I think. No, thank you. Do you mind talking just a bit longer? What about? Well, I'd like to hear about the effectiveness of a strategy if you don't mind. I rested my elbows on the counter and fixed my gaze on the librarian's face. You said this strategy of making someone in the class not there started 10 years ago. What's the success rate been since then? I see. That's an issue that cuts close to home. Mr. Chibiki leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes, then took a single deep breath. Without shifting his position, keeping his eyes closed, he replied, In 88, the first year, it was a success. Apparently there was no doubt that the casualty had infiltrated the class in April, but no one ever died. The tragedy of 87 had happened only a year before, so I suppose people were desperate to try anything, and when they worked out this new idea. Whatever the case, it was the beginning of a tradition that this strategy must be implemented in an on year. Excuse me. And from the following year up to today, not including the current year, there have been 5 on years in total. As I mentioned, in the year before last, the strategy failed partway through the year. Of the other 4, I believe it succeeded twice and failed twice. You say it failed. You mean that the student who was chosen to be not there abandoned that role, right? No, not necessarily, Mr. Chibiki replied, opening his eyes. This strategy involves a great many regulations or guidelines. I suppose you could say, for example, you only need to treat the one selected like they're not there at school, but it's fine to interact with them outside of school. But you can't do it even outside of school during school activities, things like that. Distressingly, it seems that none of these guidelines were absolute, meaning that there's no way to be sure that the people did wrong to trigger the failure. That's awful. That's how it is, as far as we know, Mr. Chibiki said glumly, and pushed up the bridge of his glasses up. I've started thinking up all sorts of analogies over the years. First of all, I don't believe this is what you might call a curse. To be sure, the incident with Misaki 26 years ago set the whole thing off in the first place. But these calamities are not raining down on us because of the workings of his angry spirit or grudge he bore, and people don't die because the casualty hiding in the class has lifted a hand against them or somehow willed it to happen. No one's malice or desire to hurt people is behind this. None the slightest. I suppose you could argue that there is a malice of an inevitable force befalling us. People sense that sort of thing in disasters, But that's the same way people feel about any natural disasters. This is simply happening, and that's why it's not a curse. It's a phenomenon. A natural phenomenon like a typhoon or an earthquake, though a supernatural one. A supernatural natural phenomenon? I hope you understand my aversion to calling this thing a supernatural phenomenon. I suspect that the logic behind the strategy to prevent it is similar. For example, Mr. Chibiki looked over at the window. It's raining. In order to prevent the rain from getting us wet, the best thing we can do is not go outside. If we wind up going outside anyway, our strategy is to use an umbrella. But it's difficult to entirely prevent the rain from getting us wet, even using an umbrella. Even when the rain is falling in a predictable way, the angle you hold your umbrella at or the way you walk can cause you to get soaking wet. And yet, using the umbrella is far better than not using one at all. Mr. Chibiki turned his eyes back to us as if asking, "How's that?" I struggled to find a response, but May spoke up quietly beside me. You could also compare it to a drought and rain dances. Oh? We're suffering from a drought, dancing to bring the rain. It is pointless, but if you were to light a fire and send smoke into the sky, in principle that will work. But there are times when that has an effect on the atmosphere and makes the rain fall, and times when it doesn't. Huh, not bad. So then, Mr. Chibiki? I was pretty much done hearing comparisons, so I cut in. What's going to happen this year? Are disasters going to stop now that there's two of us not there? I told you. I can't honestly say, but... Mr. Chibiki pushed the bridge of his glasses up again. Disasters have almost never stopped partway through the year once they've started, so... Almost never? I tried to cling to the strictest meaning of his words. Meaning that it has stopped before. That's... Just then, something that sounded like an old-timey telephone started ringing. Ignoring my question, Mr. Chibiki extracted a black device from his pocket of his jacket. So it was the ringtone of his cell phone. I apologize. Just a moment. Mr. Chibiki put the phone to his ear. He exchanged a few words with someone in a low voice I couldn't make out, and then put the phone back in his pocket. That's it for today. You can come back another time. Oh, all right. Although, I'll be out starting tomorrow. I have a bit of a mundane business I have to take care of, so I'll be out of town for a few days. I'm planning to be back at the beginning of next month at the latest. Mr. Chibiki's face looked incredibly fatigued when he said that. He rose hurriedly from his chair and extended a hand for the black binder I held. But just then, I recalled something. Actually, I spoke up quickly. There's one more thing I want to check with you. It's about what happened 15 years ago, in 1983, an on year, or was it an off year? 83? You have a class list for that year in here too, don't you? So then, I started to flip through the pages in the binder, but Mr. Chibiki raised one hand slightly and stopped me. No, Sakakibara, there's no need to check. I remember it. The fourth year after I fled to my role as a librarian, 83 was an on year. That year, third year class 3 had, yeah? I bleated, impatient. It was? I thought that maybe it hadn't been, but yeah. Why do you ask? Did something happen that year? Or that you... Oh, I see. At that point, Mr. Chibiki seemed to have realized as well. I see. Reiko's year. Yes. That was the year Reiko, now 29, had been in her third year of middle school, 1983. The year she'd been a member of third year class 3 at North Yomi, and also, that was the year Ritsuko, the year your mother had passed away. A new cloud darkened Mr. Chibiki's expression. Did that happen in this town by chance? She came back to her parents' house in Yomiyama in order to give birth, and she stayed at their house for a little while after I was born too, so she died in this town. Mr. Chibiki murmured ruefully. I never realized it at the time. I see. So that's what happened. The death of my mother, Ritsuko, 15 years ago. She was doing pretty poorly after birth, and then she caught a summer cold that had taken a turn for the worse. That's why I always heard about her death up until now. But maybe it had actually been one of the disasters brought about by the phenomenon involving third year class 3 at North Yomi. No, there was no maybe about it. That must have been what happened. A simple turn of luck. Of course. There was a possibility that was all it was. But given the position I was in now, I could hardly bring myself to believe it. Alright. And that's the end of the chapter, and I think that is a really good place to wrap it up for tonight. And then we'll continue this on our next reading stream on Thursday. So let me take us back to our chat room. That way we can have a little chill talk before we leave. Alright, so how was that, guys? I hope that stream went well. I really enjoyed it, and I think we definitely got a lot more context, and we're definitely getting into the meat and bones of the mystery. And there is not much left, in all seriousness. We're pretty much... Yeah, I'd say 3-4 more streams, and then we'll be able to be done with this, and then we can move on to the final girl support group, which is exciting. Alright. So that being said, that is it for this stream. Let me see what is in store. Tomorrow, I know we are playing some Genshin Impact. And I'm actually thinking of jumping on Nahida's story quest for that one. Just because I haven't done it yet, and evidently, one of Wriothesley's Ascension materials may have something to do with the boss as unlocked through Nahida's story. So we may play through that tomorrow, so that's going to be exciting. So we have that going for us, and then let me see. Okay. Where are you? Where are you? There you are. Okay. Yep, we have story quests, and then Wednesday we have Undertale, which I apologize in advance on my Twitter. I made a complete typo on my schedule. The Undertale stream on Wednesday is not going to be at 7 p.m. It's going to be at 2 p.m. So straighten that out. And then Thursday we'll have another spooky story night, and we'll be able to get into another a little bit more. And that is pretty much it for the week. That's about it. So thank you guys so much for joining. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream, and I will see you guys again tomorrow. Make sure you drink water, eat good food, enjoy the company around you, get good rest, and take care of yourselves. You guys have a wonderful night, okay? I'll see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye now.